often I find that our memory of a person is tarnished by his or her cause of death. Ngor was more than a murder victim and more than a refugee. He was a deeply complicated human being. In this episode, I'm speaking with Roger Warner, the co-author of Ngor's memoir, and someone who knew his complexities well. My name is Patricia Nunan, and this is Who Killed Ngor? Warning, this episode contains scenes of graphic torture. There are two people I've spoken to at length who knew Ngor extremely well. When he died, along with their grief, each had the same reaction. Well, he finally got himself killed.
He had used up the last of his 9 lives, and he might have just got himself killed, either for karmic reasons, some vast working of the universe, or because somebody wanted to revenge, somebody wanted kum.
This is Roger Warner. He co-authored Ngor's memoir, A Cambodian Odyssey, because Ngor's English wasn't up to the task. The two became close friends. The topic of kum, or revenge, and karma figure prominently in Ngor's story. So does torture. It's funny, I'd heard of Warner, of course, in connection to Ngor, but the memoir came out in 1987, which was 9 years before the murder. One day I was talking with Frank from the Innocence Center, and he referenced Warner's epilogue to the memoir. I said, "What epilogue?" My copy didn't have it. Once I read it, and Warner's enormous doubt about the LAPD story that Ngor was killed in a botched robbery, I knew I had to track him down. In January, I jumped on a train to Boston, where Warner and I talked over a long lunch. We're similar in some ways. We both tripped around Southeast Asia as freelance journalists, captivated by a region that was simultaneously exotic and living so much history. He was just under a generation ahead of me. As a student, Warner had been struck by Sidney Schanberg's reporting in the New York Times, covering the fall of Phnom Penh to the Khmer Rouge in 1975. It was that reporting that later became the basis for The Killing Fields. Maybe it was another vast working of the universe, because Warner had come across Ngor once before. He was freelancing on the Thai-Cambodian border. It was 1980 or 81. Hundreds of thousands of refugees were escaping to refugee camps. The Khmer Rouge had only just been overthrown in 1979, and Cambodia had exploded into civil war. Warner was staying at a house rented by the American Refugee Committee, or ARC. It's an aid agency. It was on the Thai side of the border near the Khao Dang refugee camp. It housed about 25 foreigners, all of whom slept on the floor. In Thailand, foreigners are called pharangs.
So it was filled with pharangs, except for one guy who was out of place, and he looked really traumatized. He was just radiating anger and chaos. You could just feel it. I mean, if your eyes swept across a room, and everybody's white, and they're from the U.S. and the U.K. and Holland and all these places, and you see this one Asian fellow, and it was as though he was sending out trauma signals in a very, very powerful, very negative way, which I found fascinating.
He just had a bad vibe.
Very, very strong, very powerful. Not as though he was intent on causing harm for anybody. It's just that he'd just come out of a situation that left him just torn apart. Rage, anger, sorrow, physical exhaustion, all those things. It's as about as strong a feeling of that sort that I'd ever seen or experienced.
A handful of years later, in the mid-1980s, Warner was called to a meeting with a book agent because of his Southeast Asia experience. The meeting was in a glitzy Manhattan high-rise.
And I'd seen the Killing Fields film at that point, and a friend of mine from Thailand had told me that this guy, Ngor, had worked for her in Khao Dang and had lived in ARC house number 2. And I thought to myself, could that really be the same guy? It didn't seem possible. And eventually we figured out it was.
Did he remember you? Or were you just
Yes.
like one of the Farang?
No. He remembered.
Right. What then began was a powerful friendship between Warner and Ngor.
That sounds like hell to me.
I don't know how to explain. You said the hell, but I said no, it's hell. I don't know how to find one word to replace hell. Like, in my life, I never saw the people kill people in my own eyes, in front of my own eyes, is like that.
This is Hang Ngor from one of Warner's original interview tapes. They spent months together, often sitting on the living room floor in Warner's Massachusetts home, going over Ngor's story. It was painstaking work. Because of language limitations, Ngor sometimes acted out the torture he had endured at the hands of the Khmer Rouge. Once again, if anyone's triggered by scenes of violence or torture, this is not the episode for you. This is an instance I consider rated PG-13. Ngor is acting out for Warner a moment similar to a scene he performed in the killing fields.
We have a long rope too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Long rope.
Yes.
And tied up me with, like in the killing fields, with the palm tree.
Oh, to your feet to your ankles?
No. Like mango tree here, okay?
Yeah.
Tied up my arm like that.
Yeah.
And the rope tied up with mango tree.
Mm-hmm.
And me like that. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like that.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Like that. And then they left.
Ngor's hands were tied behind his back, and the rope was then tied to a mango tree. Ngor also survived experiences I'd call rated X.
And after cut it, I got very painful, right? I got very painful.
Yeah, they cut your finger off.
Yes.
He was once caught
Very
stealing
painful,
food.
and
The Khmer Rouge chopped
and
off his
one
finger
thing
and
painful
chopped into
here,
his
and one
ankle
thing
with an axe
red ant here.
and left him tied up to be swarmed by red
time.
ants.
The red ant like a soldier, coming more than.
He was once strung up on a cross, crucifixion style, and left for days, while the Khmer Rouge left a fire burning beneath him.
And then he used the pliers.
Mm-hmm.
Used the plier and.
He witnessed the crucifixion and disembowelment of pregnant women.
Oh God, save my life! Please help me! Like that.
I'll stop there. You get the idea.
And how can I help her? Because of my arm tied up too.
This is what Ngor and countless other Cambodians had to endure. The Khmer Rouge took over Cambodia in April 1975 and held power for just under 4 years. Their goal was to turn the entire country into a communist utopia, a workers' paradise free of corrupt capitalist elements, including educated people like Ngor. Millions died through execution, disease, and starvation. As Ngor's interviews with Warner make clear, the Khmer Rouge engaged in what was often sadistically inventive torture. That brings us to another layer. It's part of what made Warner click with Ngor. As a freelancer, Warner had written an article for the Smithsonian Magazine about figures in Southeast Asian folklore. They're spirits, like fairies or pixies, called probets, although there's no way I'm pronouncing that right.
It's folkloric entities who will punish you in various ways. If you steal, if you kill, so forth and so on. And the punishments are quite specific. One famous one has a man climbing in agony up a cactus, and there are just spikes everywhere, that kind of thing.
Some of these scenes of torture are actually depicted in the carvings along the walls of Angkor Wat. That's part of the 12th century temple complex in northwestern Cambodia, for which the country is renowned.
It's a very common folklore that if you do things that hurt others, that there are all these spirits that will punish you in certain ways. So that's a big part of sort of underground culture in that region, that understanding. And when I spoke about that with Hang, he said, yes, of course. And that related to his accounts of the tortures. He could identify completely.
It would be going too far to directly link this folklore to the horrific torture and punishments carried out by the Khmer Rouge, Warner says. But there's a resonance.
It lends itself into the punishment that the Khmer Rouge handed out. It wasn't just that they were whipping and killing people. It was almost as though it was a reaction of this, a reenaction of these folkloric stories that were sort of underlying their culture. So there was sort of a recognition of that.
The bottom line is that as a writing partner, Warner had a profound understanding of the place Ngor was coming from, both literally and spiritually. I want to introduce you to Sarah Combe. She's an old friend of mine from Cambodia, where we both lived in the 1990s. Among her journalism credits, she was a founding editor of the Phnom Penh Post, a prominent English-language newspaper. In the 1980s, Combe was with the San Francisco newspaper, the Tenderloin Times. It covered California's resettled refugee communities and even published in 4 languages: English, Lao, Vietnamese, and Khmer. Sometime after The Killing Fields came out, Combe met Ngor at a fundraiser, a sunset cruise aboard a boat.
I remember he was sort of the guest of honor, and there wasn't any sort of podium or platform. He was just on the deck, started talking, and the crowd was surrounding him. And as he talked, he became increasingly emotional. It was intense, almost uncomfortable, as he became more and more angry and, grief-stricken. And he was, towards the end of it, he was pretty much shouting.
Right. Do you remember the nature of his comments?
He was talking about the murder of his wife. He was talking about nearly starving to death. He was talking about just the horrendous treatment. And of course, where he became most emotional, angry and grief-stricken was when he was talking about the death of his wife during the Khmer Rouge regime.
I mean, would you say, this is a modern term, but would you say he was triggered?
I wouldn't say he was triggered. I would say he was in an ongoing traumatic response in general.
So, talking about his own experience, he actually agitated himself.
He was agitated as he talked about his own experience, and I think if someone had offered him as they might do nowadays, sort of a gentle, if you don't feel like talking, you don't have to, and do it, if he'd been offered the choice of not talking or whatever, he would have talked as he did. It was in him and needed to come out. That's the way I felt, that he needed to basically explode with this emotion as he talked.
I never met Hang Ngor, but I was at a press conference he gave once in Phnom Penh sometime in the early 90s. It was similar to what Combe described, uncomfortable. I remember Ngor holding up his right hand, showing us his cut-off pinky. He was emotional. His English was rudimentary, heavily accented and halting. Afterwards, as I walked out with a senior colleague, he immediately called Ngor an asshole. He'd wasted our time, he said. The press conference had no point, except maybe for promoting Ngor's book. This has been a really dark episode, but we have to go to one more dark place that Combe just mentioned. It was a defining moment in Ngor's life and one that he never got over. When the Khmer Rouge took over, Ngor was engaged. After that, he and his fiancée couldn't get married because weddings and even love were among the things the Khmer Rouge had banned. So he and Chang Mi Hui simply recognized themselves as husband and wife, since that had been their intention. In 1978, Hui was pregnant. At around 7 months, she went into premature labor with life-threatening complications. Ngor was a gynecologist. He had completed his medical degree just before the Khmer Rouge takeover. In any other circumstance, his memoir makes clear, he firmly believed he could have saved her. But had Ngor revealed he was a doctor to the Khmer Rouge, he, Hui, and the child would almost certainly have been executed. Ngor frantically tried to get Hui to an approved Khmer Rouge doctor. His appeals were rejected. Hui and their unborn child both died.
Ultimately, after spending a lot of time with Heng and interviewing him at great length, I decided intuitively that he was quite truthful. Most people, when they have war stories, make themselves the center of the story, and the story serves to authenticate them as a hero, and they want other people to understand that, in fact, they were at the center of the action and were heroes. Mm-hmm. And here you have a doctor, or he said he was, who delivered his own child, only neither the child nor his wife survived. So that is quite the opposite of somebody trying to make himself into a hero. That is somebody dredging up something pretty horrific that gnaws at the very core of his soul.
This wasn't just a defining moment in Ngor's life. It plays into what the Innocence Center and I are confident were the wrongful convictions of Indra Lim, Tak Sun Tan, and Jason Chan. They were the teenage gang members convicted of murdering Ngor. Ngor had escaped Cambodia carrying with him a small photo of Hui. It was from an ID card of some sort. In Thailand, as a refugee, he hired jewelers to use that photo to make a pendant. Ngor wore the pendant with the image of his late wife on a gold chain. His friends and family knew that he cherished it. When Ngor was murdered, his body was found without the chain and pendant, and without his Rolex watch. The Los Angeles police never recovered the necklace in any pawn shop or in the possession of any of the suspects. They never found a murder weapon or Ngor's missing Rolex. They never found fingerprints or DNA that tied any of the 3 teenagers to the crime. Still, they used the pendant and chain to create a narrative. The 3 gang members were mugging Ngor, who would not give up his necklace, and for that he was killed. Absolutely no evidence exists to support the police narrative. Warner described Ngor's murder as a vast working of the universe, and it's a phrase that's stuck with me. As I've investigated this case, I've noticed some weird energy around Ngor's death, and some strange coincidences. First, there's a date. Leaving Cambodia, Ngor adopted his niece, Sophia. Her birthday is April 17. It's not the same year, but that's the day the Khmer Rouge took power in 1975. April 17 is also the date in 1998 that Chan, Lim, and Tan were convicted. Lim and Tan are the children of Khmer refugees. The day that had changed millions of Cambodians' lives had now changed theirs and Chan's. Through the necklace and the death of Chang Mi Hui, it's almost as if the Khmer Rouge were still claiming victims. The same day the guilty verdicts were handed down, Cambodian leaders confirmed that Pol Pot, the head of the Khmer Rouge, had died in his remote jungle hideout just days before. But it doesn't stop there. There's an episode of the TV show The Simpsons. It's called Team Homer. In it, Homer Simpson wanted to win a bowling trophy, for which he had even built a trophy case. The scene then cuts to a close-up of the trophy case, revealing that the only trophy Homer has is actually Hang Ngor's Oscar, on which he's crossed out Ngor's name and written his own. It aired on January 7, 1996, 7 weeks before Ngor's death. As one online fan site puts it, it looks like Homer Simpson killed Hang Ngor. The Simpsons producers replaced that scene for reruns and the DVDs. The stolen Oscar on Homer's shelf now belongs to actor Don Amici, but you can still see the original on YouTube. Finally, there is also an allegation that a French newspaper reported Ngor's death weeks before it happened. A defense lawyer brought it up as a possible attempt by someone to intimidate him. She wanted time to investigate, according to court transcripts. The judge rejected that request. But she doesn't say the name of the newspaper, and I've not been able to confirm that. All of that, to me, is a lot of strange energy. Some kind of feedback loop between Ngor and the universe, which almost seemed to be hinting that trouble was brewing. Of course, another word for that is karma. Ngor was a human being who'd literally been tortured. He lost his wife and unborn child before his eyes. He also saw his father marched off by the Khmer Rouge to his execution. To my knowledge, he never had therapy for PTSD, so in many ways, Ngor remained a tortured soul. Here's why this matters. When Ngor returned to Cambodia in the 1990s, it looks like his rage and his unresolved trauma made its way to the surface. I'm not any sort of therapist or trauma counselor, but I've been treated for PTSD and I've read my share of books on the subject. To me, it's obvious that Ngor was laboring under a massive amount of untreated PTSD. Some people I've interviewed suggest the same thing. There's even a New York Times story. It's from October 28, 1984, and it's about the making of the killing fields. It describes a flashback Ngor suffered when he momentarily believed that a young Thai actor was a Khmer Rouge soldier. He ran off the set screaming. I'm sympathetic to Ngor, of course, although I should note that I've never had a flashback and the scale of his trauma is vastly greater than my own. But the likely PTSD is significant because I believe it really impacted the way Ngor related to people. I'm going to be blunt here because an obvious pattern has emerged. Ngor was warm with Westerners, but at times he was an absolute prick to Cambodians. At this point in the investigation, I'm actually wondering how much he extended that rudeness to other Asians.
I remember going to a restaurant in LA's Chinatown with him where I expected him to act like a big Hollywood star, and he didn't. He was very quiet, very meek, he would let the maitre d' sit him wherever the thought was. I mean, he did not ask for special treatment. However, yeah, he could be very rude, especially to a fellow Khmer.
So it seems to me like he compartmentalizes well. So some
so.
people remember him as this absolute sweetheart, and then some people remember the outspokenness.
And the rudeness, and the anger.
So where was he rude? Like what circumstances would he be rude?
I don't know the Khmer words. In Thai, when you reproach somebody for their rudeness, you say, "Mai supap," not polite. And it's really a way to remonstrate or to scold somebody if they're not sticking to the norms of courtesy in those cultures. And he was loud. He laughed too loud. He made inappropriate jokes. There were Khmer of high station who rather quickly classified him as trash.
I'm going to talk to another of Ngor's close friends, this time a Cambodian, in an upcoming episode. She, too, is going to tell us how arrogant Ngor was to Cambodians, how loud he was, and how he thought his U.S. passport would keep him safe. But you said he made enemies. Did he have enemies in the expatriate Cambodian community in Los Angeles?
I believe he did. I think he was very controversial.
Here's the deal with PTSD. You can get addicted to risk. Again, I'm not a trauma expert, but I'll explain it how I understand it. I don't know anyone who's not addicted to their phone. That's because our brains give us little hits of dopamine every time we get a notification. We're constantly checking our phones or scrolling because we're in search of our next dopamine hit. In life-threatening situations, people experience a surge of adrenaline. That's what saves you. Adrenaline motivates you to act. Over time, you can get addicted. The same way we constantly look at our phones for our next dopamine hit, some people with PTSD are in constant search for their next adrenaline hit. It's subconscious.
Did he try to make sure you were a taxi driver? Did he ask you questions about driving a taxi? Or not?
Yeah, he asked me what kind of taxi driver.
Now here's Ngor, a doctor. He successfully spent the 4-year Khmer Rouge period pretending he was an uneducated taxi driver, deceiving them in any number of small confrontations.
And you drive to where? I said from Phnom Penh to Takao or Phnom Penh to...
He used to sneak out of the Khmer Rouge labor camp in the middle of the night to forage for edible plants. Then he'd sneak back in. It's in his memoir. Survival meant taking risks. Outsmarting your captors is both an adrenaline hit and an ego boost. For this next question, I had to call Roger Warner up a day or two after our interview. That's why the audio sounds a little different. So just give me your take. What was Ngor's relationship with women and all these romances he had?
Well, he was something of a rascal. He became an OBGYN specialist after medical school to pursue, one supposes, his interests. And when he was in the United States, particularly after he got his Academy Award, he was a real rascal, which is his thing. He had tons of affairs, outraging many husbands and people who thought they were in exclusive relationships with their lady friends. He was careless. He liked risk. He liked the thrill of conquest, I suppose. And some men are like that. Friends of Heng's, though, observed that it wasn't helping him. It wasn't helping him stabilize. It wasn't helping him find a happy life. And at his core, he was very unhappy.
And this is so interesting because, we've spoken about how much he compartmentalizes, because in a very large way, the memoir that you worked on together is this love story to his wife who died.
Yes. Yes. Well, she was his exception. And I guess losing her when she was pregnant and trying to have a child was, a kind of torture for him. And how it compared with the actual physical tortures he went through under the Khmer Rouge, I cannot say. However, it really hurt him. And I guess it set him loose.
So would you say that he was addicted to sex or addicted to risk taking?
I think more to risk and to sort of outsmarting others. He would at times get this expression on his face where he narrowed his eyes and you just knew he was going to try to fool somebody. He's going to try to con somebody. Now, I don't want to say that was his total character. It was only a part of it. So, he was very complex. And he had a lot of sides. I think, though, that he was addicted to a kind of careless risk. And, that probably led in some way to his murder, which is to say, if you believe that it wasn't just 3 hardened criminals in Chinatown who saw an opportunity, if you think that there was something more to it, I suspect that it was Heng who got himself in trouble.
Back in real time, as our lunch in Boston wrapped up, I ran through some of my investigatory leads with Warner just to see if any jogged his memory or if any theories resonated. But Warner had been out of touch with Ngor for several years by the time he was killed. Still, as his epilogue makes clear, he had tremendous doubts about the LAPD investigation. His suspicions fell on Ngor's decision to get involved in Cambodia's forestry trade, a famously mafioso economic sector. We'll get into that in an upcoming episode. Warner was and remains immensely encouraging of my investigation. He sent me the audio of his and Ngor's interviews for the memoir. He sent me dozens of photos of Ngor from his personal collection. I've been using some of those for social media. He even sent me some prized photo contact sheets from the making of the killing fields. Even if I never solve the case, he says, I have an extraordinary opportunity to do justice to Ngor's story. He wanted to help me. It's good karma. We're going to come back to Roger Warner in future episodes. He has more to say than I could include here. To close, I just want to remind you of one of his thoughts. Ngor had many enemies. He was a controversial figure in Los Angeles and in Cambodia.
When contemplating the idea of how he died and who killed him, the net has to be thrown awfully broadly.
At the start of this episode, I said I'd spoken at length to 2 friends of Ngor who knew him extremely well.
Deep down in his head, I got American passport. I'm safe. That's my protection. I said, no, it's not.
We'll hear from her not next week, but in an upcoming episode. My name is Patricia Nunan, and this is Who Killed Heng Ngor? If you knew Ngor, I'd love to hear from you. I'm at whokilledhengnor@gmail.com, and I'm on Telegram as MP Nunan.